class. Okay, I guess that's a little note.
Sorry about that. I've never done that before.
There you go. I'm not sure how to get rid of that off my screen, Leslie Ann. Let me just see if I can do that.
It actually looks different to how it was the last time I recorded it. So, are you good?
I'll have to come out and get rid of that, I think. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm just really loading this screen again. Might be good next time, Leslie Ann, to probably put that on before we get going. They've obviously changed the way in which they run that video platform. So the 3 keywords I'll give you during the class, I'll put on the screen so it's easy to see. You'll see this little icon. Come up with a keyword and it should be easy to record. So let's have a little gander at this class. First of all, for anybody here who's not a Presidio real estate agent, we certainly welcome you to this class. Raising the Bar is one of our Presidio platforms. We try and raise the bar wherever we are. Our principal broker, who is Jennifer Yo, an owner of Presidio, has said this: doing the right thing in every area of our jobs only makes the industry better as a whole. So when we all do this, we actually make this industry better. Staying committed to that helps us all have a strong, resilient, long-lasting career, and will bring more referrals and business to you than you can ever imagine. That's why at Presidio, we all pledge to raise the bar. So wherever you are in your business, hopefully at the end of this class, we can just all of us, including me, have raised our bar a little with some extra information or detail or confidence in working as a realtor in this industry. I saw this interesting quote from Samuel Goldwyn, who was a Polish-American film producer. He said this: he said, "A verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on." I thought that was quite interesting. And obviously we're looking at a contract today, and this contract is worth the paper it's written on, because it is written on the paper. So let's see if we can tuck into this buyer's presentation and exclusive buyer broker agreement. We shall first review the exclusive buyer broker agreement. If we've got any brand new agents on this class, this will be definitely beneficial to you. We've got agents that are seasoned. It's always good to remind ourselves of the of what this contract says, what it means, and how it binds the buyer into our brokerage. So when we've done this, then we'll look a little bit at the buyer's presentation as we show a home, which obviously most of us have done, who've been in the industry a lot. If we've got brand new agents, it's also good for them to view that. I will not respond to any chat. Leslie Ann will respond to chat for you if you've got any questions on chat, but I will encourage you to be involved and easily unmute and just chip in with your ideas and comments and stories, anything you can add to this class. I believe that we can all benefit from our experience as we share it with one another. So just literally unmute and say, "Steve, I've got a question or a comment or something to share." And we'd love to hear from you. I'd love to have people involved in these classes. That's what makes them good, and we can all share what we know and learned. So first of all, let's look at this buyer broker agreement. If you go to the obviously www.utahrealestate.com/forms, you'll see at the very top there that little menu item that's called forms, right up there, you see in the pink circle. And then if you click on that, you'll come up with this form, which will show you all of the, this page showing you all of the forms that are available. Obviously, you're going to check the one down there that is exclusive buyer broker agreement designated agency. That's the form you want, okay? When you've clicked that, it'll then bring you up a form that looks something like this, where you can then enter in your detail and save that form. So that's where we go to get this buyer broker agreement. Agency disclosure, which is important for us as buyers agents to have signed by our client, who is the buyer. So let's have a look at this exclusive buyer broker agreement, which is a contract between your client and your brokerage and ourselves, that ultimately it's the broker and the client. So at the very top of this form, you can see we have 2 logos. Can you see those 2 logos? We've got that logo there, which is the Utah Association of Realtors that qualifies this form as a legal form, and important for us to understand and share that with our agents. You know, agents must go through the Utah Division of Real Estate to activate their licenses and place them with a realtor member broker before joining the Salt Lake Board of Realtors. So there's some qualification that we have to have in order to gain that logo as part of our license, which obviously we all have. You join as a member of the Utah Association of Realtors, you become part of the largest network of real estate professionals in Utah. So make sure that your client understands that you are a professional and you're qualified and you're licensed to serve them and to give them the best help in buying a property, which will be their biggest purchase, most likely, that they've ever made. You'll notice this other little signature or logo on the top right there. Very important, this one is. It's the Fair Housing Equal Opportunities logo, and of course responsible for administering and enforcing federal fair housing laws and establishing policies that make sure all Americans have equal access to housing of their choice. And includes, when it says all Americans, it includes anybody else who is here on visa or permanent residency. I'm actually a citizen now, but well, I was a permanent resident for a number of years before that, coming from England. So this is a important logo. It lets people know that we are going to be fair in this industry, representing them and also working with other folk that are involved in purchasing real estate. You'll notice on the top of that form there, it says this is a legally binding agreement. Read carefully before signing designated agency brokerage. That's in bold capital letters, so it's kind of shouting out at you, making sure you understand that this form is a legal form. You'll notice you put your brokerage in there, and obviously you would then put the buyer's name in that other section. And you'll fill that on the form. It's very easy to do. Some of you may have other brokerage forms that you may use, but this is the standard one from the Utah Real Estate website. Any questions on that slide before we carry on, or any comments? Very good. Let's move on and let's look at the term of agreement. So we took into this little section here. Term of agreement, the buyer hereby retains the company, including whoever the agent is, who is the buyer's agent, as the authorized agent for the company, stating on the effective date as defined in section 15 below, you can have all the dates there, and ending at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Remember that 5 p.m. is very important. All of our contracts end at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. They don't end at 1 minute to midnight, and so it's important you remember that date, whether it's addendums or repsies, buy broker agreements. Anything we're doing is going to finish at 5 p.m. on the date. So that's where your cutoff time is. You've got to put your date and your year in there, or the closing of acquisition of property, whichever occurs first, the initial term to act as the exclusive buyer's agent in locating or negotiating for an acquisition of the property in. Now, you can put here several counties. You could put just one county, or you could put located at a specific property address, which we'll put in that B section. During the initial term of this exclusive buyer broker agreement and any extensions thereof, the buyer agrees not to enter into another buyer broker agreement with another real estate agent or brokerage. Anybody got any questions or comments on that form? Mark, were you unmuting there to say something? I saw your light come up. Maybe not. So just remember, you've got, put your name at the top there. You're the authorized agent for the company. And the effective date, I said, we'll go through 15 below, section 15 in a few minutes. Remember, it's ending at the 5 p.m. and also either that or when the obviously property closes. And you are acting as the exclusive buyer broker. You're going to put in one or the other. It's either going to be in the county or counties, or it's going to be located at a particular address. So I put a note at the top there. You as the buyer's agent are retained with the company. So your brokerage as the authorized agent for the company. You're representing the company. Make sure your client knows that Notice that the buyer is agreeing not to enter into another buyer-broker agreement with another real estate agent or brokerage. That's very, very important. So just to clarify that early on to make sure they don't have anybody else they're working with. So this first section will talk about your time frame. It'll talk about your location. And of course, very, very important, it'll talk about exclusivity. So that's what we are agreeing to in this first section of the EBBA. Anybody got any questions or comments on that? Or has anybody had any difficulty working with a buyer when they come to this section? Okay, let's move on then to the next section, shall we? So now we're going to talk about the brokerage fee. Comes up pretty early on, section 2. The brokerage fee, if during the initial term or any extension of the initial term, the buyer or any other person acting in the buyer's behalf acquires an interest in real property or any real property as referenced in section 1 above, which we've just gone through, the buyer agrees to pay to the company a brokerage fee of the amount of, which is the dollar sign, or it can be a percentage of. Generally speaking, we're going to probably put a percentage in there, but either is fine. And that will be of the acquisition price of the property, which is called the brokerage fee. It's called the brokerage fee because the brokerage gets the money. You don't get the money. We don't get the money. Make sure our clients understand they're not paying us directly. They're paying our brokerage. Our brokerage will then pay us a commission. Okay, we're working for the brokerage. If the property acquired by the by the buyer is listed with a brokerage, the buyer agent commission, which is the BAC, paid to the company by the listing brokerage shall satisfy the buyer's obligation for the brokerage fee shown above, provided that the BAC is not less than the amount shown above. If the BAC is less than the amount shown above, buyer will pay the difference. Whoa, buyer will pay the difference at closing. That's what they're signing for. So if you got in there 3% and I guess the seller's agent or the seller is only offering 2%, then in this part of the document, it's saying the buyer will pay the difference, which will be 1% to you as your buyer's agent commission to the brokerage. In the absence of a commission agreement with the owner of the selected property, the brokerage fee shown above shall be paid by the buyer, unless otherwise agreed in writing by the buyer of the company. And the brokerage fee shown above shall be due and payable on A, if a purchase the date of the recording of the closing documents, or B, if it's a lease, the effective date of the lease, or C, if an option, the date the option agreement is signed. If the transaction is prevented by default of buyer, then compensation will be immediately paid to the company. So anybody got any questions on that? Or comments? Or I sent you completely asleep already. I've only just got going on this. So just remember the fee is paid to the brokerage. Make sure your client understands that. Also make sure that they understand that if the seller's not paying that full amount that you've agreed on, the buyer will pay the difference at closing. That's what they're signing to here. Let's make sure that our buyers understand what they're signing here. Anybody got any questions on this, or any comments, or any stories? Okay, so on this section 2, we are agreeing a brokerage fee, which we represented on lots of documents as the BAC. All right. And you'll see that on the listings. We'll look at that. Make sure you see what that is. Does anybody know what it means if it's got, I guess that's a question here. If you see BAC net, what does that mean? Anybody know? Sometimes you'll see that on an MLS listing. Does anybody know what that means? Is anybody brave enough to tell me what that means?
Well, the net, the difference between the net and the gross is...
Laura, how are you doing, Laura?
Hey, pretty good, Stephen. How are you?
Good to see that someone's awake on this class. Thank you for chipping in. Tell us about it.
Well, I think the difference between the gross and the net is the gross is before anything's taken out. The net is the balance after things have been deducted, and that's yeah, what.
So Correct. Yeah. So you really want the gross. You really want the if you want the most money. So, but as long as you know what the difference is, that's good. Because when you've got concessions and that can reduce whatever that commission is. Okay, and then of course this little section does talk about the buyer paying the shortfall of the BAC. Has anybody here had a situation where they've had the buyer pay the shortfall of the BAC?
I was actually
Brian?
wondering how often that's enforced. I've had title companies push back and say they've never had, or it's so rare that the buyer makes up the difference for one reason or another, that I feel like that section's very rarely enforced.
Good comment. They are actually signing to this, and often there'll be some differences of commission agreed on, between the agents on both sides and the clients. Just remember that this agreement is actually between your client and the brokerage. You're representing the brokerage, and it is ideal that you make sure that you're in concert with your broker if you are changing that arrangement, because they could say, yes, buyer needs to pay the difference. But you are right, Brian, it's probably not enforced that often, but it is there, and we need to understand it, and we also need to make sure that our clients understand that. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts on that? Or anybody like to respond to Brian's question? Has anybody seen this happen?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was going to say, when it comes to fees, collecting fees or deficiencies for commissions, if we anticipate that that's going to happen, what we have done in the past is put the language right in an addendum in the contract. And we actually just include it, like we're asking for closing costs, which I know doesn't happen a ton these days, but we would include the language saying that the closing costs were the credit that we're asking for from the seller could be used for commissions, title costs, basically any costs related to the transaction. And so we've been able to collect efficiencies that way, but we put it right in the contract.
Correct. Very good. Yeah, very good. Leslie, did you have a comment? No. Okay, super. All right, let's move on to the next section on this. Oh, we got a keyword already. That's great. This is probably going to be brokerage, maybe. It is. Okay, so the first keyword, everybody, make sure you're paying attention. Wake up. This is the one. It's going to be brokerage. It begins with a B, B-R-O-K-E-R-A-G-E. Brokerage will be the first keyword for this class. You'd be surprised how many people say to me, oh, I didn't get the keywords. Anyway, there it is on the screen. Real easy to see. It's brokerage, B-R-O-K-E-R-A-G-E. Write it down. That is the first keyword for this class.
And I'm just putting the link to the Google form in the chat now. So if you want to add the keywords to this form as they're given, you can do that.
That's easiest then. You can just send it as soon as you get the third one and you're done. Then I can bank your hours pretty quickly. So protection period, let's get our helmet on and our armor on. This little section is quite fun. Protection period, if within so many months after the termination or expiration of this exclusive buyer broker agreement, buyer or any person acting on buyer's behalf enters into an agreement to purchase, exchange, obtain an option on or lease any property as referenced in section 1, which we've just looked at, located for the buyer brokers, so the buyer, by buyer's agent or the company, or on which the buyer's agent negotiates in buyer's behalf during the initial term, buyer agrees to pay to the company the brokerage fee referenced in section 2. So for some reason we have the property on the market for a number of months. That's probably not going to happen in this market because it's just hours and days and they get sold. But we do have markets sometimes where properties are sitting on there for many days, weeks or months, and then they take it off the market or they fire you and go to another agent. You can put in there a number of months after that time where you can still get commission on the property. Generally, people will put in maybe 3 months in there, but it's between you and the seller and your broker, of course, what you decide to do there. So any questions or comments on that little section? Pretty simple. Just remember that this is the number of months after the termination or expiration of the BBA. And make sure your buyer understands that there's going to be some fee there if it's within that period of time. So this is the buyer's agent protection period and the BAC paid for by the buyer. Okay, let's move on to the next section, which is 4. Buyer presentation or disclosures. So the buyer warrants that the buyer has not entered into any other exclusive buyer broker agreement with any other brokerage that is still in force and effect. So they could have been working with someone, but now they're out the game and they don't have any allegiance to any other contract or brokerage. The buyer will A, in all communications with other real estate agents, notify the agents in advance that the buyer has entered into an exclusive buyer broker agreement with the company. So once we sign this off, if someone comes up, or the nephew gets his license, or Auntie Meg gets her license, hey Johnny, we're ready to do this. Okay, I can't deal with you because I've already signed an exclusive buyer broker agreement with Janice Smith. She's my realtor, and I'm informing you. That's what that means. B, furnish the buyer's agent with relevant personal and financial information to facilitate the buyer's ability to acquire property. So we're going to be talking a bit about financing here, or information that might be personal. Make sure your buyer understands that you're going to be understanding or knowing some of that information, and you'll need to do that in order to help them find their home. C, exercise care and diligence in evaluating the physical and legal condition of the property selected by the buyer. We as agents don't have any part of choosing or evaluating how good a property is for our clients. They are responsible for that. That's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to make sure they understand they have a time period to do their due diligence, and they can evaluate the physical and legal condition of the property. D, hold harmless the company and the buyer's agent against any claims as a result of any injuries incurred while inspecting any property. So, you take a client to the house and she trips over, bangs her head on the concrete steps, they cannot sue us. E, upon signing of this exclusive buyer broker agreement, personally review and sign the buyer due diligence checklist form and wire fraud alert disclosure. 2 very important forms here. Usually, a good seller's agent will have that form done fairly early on so that we can get our buyer to sign it, read it, understand it. And then, of course, we've got the wire fraud alert disclosure that they will also need to sign. And they're agreeing in this section they will do that. And F, disclose to the buyer's agent all properties in which the buyer, as of the date of this exclusive buyer broker agreement, in either negotiated to acquire or has at present interest in acquiring. So maybe, Uncle Frank says, hey, there's a property, there's a sell by owner on this street, just an ideal home for you to buy. They need to disclose that to you because you're still representing them on that purchase.
Stephen, I have a question.
Yeah.
I've been a realtor for a long time, but it's this, exclusive buyer broker agreement that, it's really hard to, to say, okay, sign this before you get in my car. Or sign. I would have meetings and bring them in. So I just want to know how everybody else handles this, because I used to have a formal office meeting where people would come in, I'd meet with them and go through my whole spiel and my system that I have in place for that. But a lot of people are kind of hesitant because the trust level's not there. It depends on how they know me and where the source of marketing came from. But I'm finding that I have to take them out a few times, and a lot of times they're signing it when we're putting our first offer in. So I want to know how other people handle this.
I think that's a great question. I'm glad you shared that. I remember when I was first in the industry, because I was desperate for business, I was all over the place. And I was showing these houses, and then they were going to other realtors. You know, I was just kind of being used. And I figured, I'm not doing this anymore. It's winding me up. You know, I'd go and show a bunch of houses, then I'd follow up, and then I remember going to this, showing this one guy, and I showed him some houses. And I said, "Would you like to sign this?" No. He said, "I'm seeing some more houses this afternoon," but that was with another broker. And basically, he was getting freebies from all these brokers. He says, "Well, if I buy one of these, I'll sign one." I'm thinking, this is not good, this isn't. So then I kind of sharpened up my act. And I was doing a lot of Zillow, not Zillow advertising, or maybe it was Zillow. Yeah, it probably was Zillow. Different advertising on the internet. So I was having people contact me that I did not know. And I just didn't want to waste my time all the time, you know? And so I got really tough with this one guy. And I had to travel like 30 minutes to this property. I said, "Look," I said, "I'm very happy to represent you and find a property." I said, "But I will require you to sign a buy broker agreement so that I'm exclusively working for you. I'm committed to you and you're committed to me." He says, "Okay, that's fine." So I travel all the way out there, it's like 30, 40-minute drive. So I get out there and he's there outside the property. So I go to, I say, "So here's my buy broker agreement. Shall we go through it?" He says, "Oh," he said, "I don't think I'll sign that at the moment," he says. Inside I was steaming. I thought, I'm really annoyed now. So I just said to him, I said, "Okay, will you let me know if you want to see any more properties, including this one, and then, you know, we can go from there." And he was not happy, but I was not going to show him that property because I'd been taken for a ride for so many times. Anyway, he says, "Okay, let's have a look at it." We went through it. And he signed it. He was happy. I showed him the property. He didn't buy that property, but he did buy another property with me. So there's two extremes. What I tend to do now, I mean, yesterday I showed a property to a couple that I did not know. They were a referral from another agent from the Valley. And of course they didn't know us, but we did know the agent. So we got a relationship there. And I didn't have them sign anything, but I'm pretty confident there's no problem with them working with us because they're referred from a friend. So that's okay. Yeah. But generally speaking, we have to be really careful because we can be taken for a ride if we're not careful. I always say to people, "Look, do you want to be my customer or my client? Because if you want to be my client, we've got to sign this. We're not really working in contract until we've got this BBA signed." So it's a real.
I was going to add a comment on that, like how tough it is, because, you know, I'm sort of, I guess, like you, I've always in the past tried to have a meeting first before I started to show houses. I mean, it's sort of like with the listing, we wouldn't dream of starting to market a property and put pictures out there and tell our clients about it without a listing agreement. So why would we run around and work for buyers? But over time, there definitely is buyers have so many more options, and so you kind of have to make adjustments. And so there are times where I'll show them a house maybe a couple of times, and then
that's what I do here.
Appointment, if we feel like it's going in the right direction and they're actually serious, then we'll sit down and do it. But it's hard to draw like a hard and fast line in the sand and say I'll never open up because I did it just this a few weeks ago. A person called me, wanted to open up one of my listings, didn't have an agreement or anything with them, and I just decided just go do it. And sure enough, they ended up being on the other side, having me represent them. So I was able to double side the listing. So I mean, sometimes great things happen, other times it's total dud. But if you give them at least a few shots, you can make a good rapport, get a good rapport with them, and size them up and see if they're even worth business with.
Yeah, you're right. Each situation is different and we have to kind of gauge it, but we have got to be careful that we're not taken advantage of because you're doing all the work and you're not getting paid anything. So you've got to get that balance. But then you've got to be gentle in the sense that they've got to get to know you, and you've also got to get to know them. You've got to be happy to work with them. Maybe you might not want to work with them if they're too difficult.
See, if they're not pre-approved at this point, I won't waste my time with them.
Correct.
That's like
but they say to you, I'm pre-qualified. I'm pre-qualified. Says, yeah, okay then. That's not going to do much good when we start looking at buying a house. You've got to be
and if you've shown them a couple of houses and they still resist even sitting down to have that discussion with you, then they're probably not worth continuing to
Yeah, we've got to respect yourself. You've got to have respect for yourself.
They've got to respect you for you to respect them. And it's got to be a two-way train. It's got to be balanced. But this is pretty important. We go through this and make sure they understand this. You know, this is kind of one of my things. I find it difficult to understand how many people do not recognize that a realtor is a licensed professional. Just like a licensed professional, dentist, doctor, you know, optician, you know, contract, we have had to gain a license to actually do this work. You know, it's cost us time and it's cost us money, and we have some experience. I find it hard to understand why we get such a bad name in the industry. You know, when people sit in the dentist chair, in comes the paper, you know, just before, you know, you're going to open your mouth and do all that work in there. They want you to sign off that you're not going to sue them and it's okay if it goes wrong. And yet, you know, people look at us sometimes and think they don't want to sign these forms. But yeah, you've got to get the balance right. Yes, Brian.
But one approach I've taken, especially during the last year with COVID, is the liability issue. And so, you know, upon the initial conversation, I'll explain, okay, I need these forms at least reviewed and looked at. So I'll send them PDF copies, make sure they're pre-qualified. And then, you know, as I'm showing houses, it's a liability factor where, you know, if you get sick or if somebody else gets sick, we need this document signed, you know, for your protection and my protection, you know, and, you know, so I can legitimately represent you in the transaction. And, you know, I've wasted my time when I first got my license, plenty of times, that I think this is a very important step for buyer's agents to get over asking for, you know, the signed document.
Yeah, very good point, Brian. Thanks for sharing that. So on this sheet, basically, we want to make sure that understand what the buyer will do. And obviously confirm that he has no other BBA in place. He'll inform other agents that he's got this EBBA in place. He'll share any relevant sort of personal financial information with you. He's going to take personal, I say he or she, they are going to take full responsibility for the property condition. Buyer will not file any claims against the agent or the company. They will sign the seller's disclosure document and the wire fraud one, and also disclose to the agent any other properties of interest that they might have. So basically in that section 4, they are saying that they'll do all these things for us. That's what this piece of the contract is confirming. And hopefully we have a happy buyer, and that makes us a happy agent. Okay, let's move on to the next part, which is...
Stephen, can I ask you a question?
Yes, you can.
I have somebody sign a buyer broker's agreement, but the problem I've had in the past is they walk into a new home, model home, and now all of a sudden they want to buy the model, you know, they want to build with the builder. But then the builder says, oh, wait a minute, you weren't here when they first came in. So, it's now, you know, I mean, normally, well, I won't tell you how I handle it, but gracefully. What do you recommend that situation? Because, you know, I give my clients a stack of cards and I say, if you ever stop by one of these, then give them a card and tell them you're represented. But a lot of times they forget to do that, or they don't do it.
Yeah, so you've got to be on it fairly quickly. Obviously, they do have a buyer broker agreement with you. And the bottom line is, even if they, whatever property they're buying, that they're still saying they're going to pay your commission. Even if that builder has an agent they want to include, they could end up paying 9%. That's if it was 3, 3, and 3. But they are still liable to pay you or your broker is that 3% because or whatever's agreed, whatever that buyer fee is.
Okay, we know they're liable, but how many people really enforce that? I mean, it's like on your buyer broker, if you say it's 3%, and I just closed on a deal on Thursday that the BAC was 2.25%. So I have 3% in my buyer broker agreement, but then I have, I'm collecting 2.25%. So am I really going to go and charge them you know, these clients I've sold and bought 3 homes with before. Am I really going to go in and charge them the difference? No, I'm not, because they're going to continue to use me and refer people to me. So, I mean, how do people handle that? I mean, am I just a softie, or?
You've got to really make it clear. You know, you said to them, give you the business cards and hand them out, but you've got to explain why. So they understand that the bottom line is they could end up making up the difference of that commission. If they go into a new construction, a builder, and they understand that the first thing they've got to tell that builder is, hey, I'm represented by Laura, and I have a buyer agreement, she's my agent. Right from the outset, in their mind, they're thinking, if I don't say this, I could end up having to pay a third commission. You see what I mean? If we can get that planted in their heads that they understand, then they'll be in control, and they will always share that they are represented by an agent, because they don't want to pay any more money. Because it clearly says in this agency agreement, irrespective of whether we're going to enforce it or not, it says that's what the contract is. And if they understand that, then most likely when they go to a new build without telling you, they will tell them, because they don't want to pay any more money. Does that make sense?
Has anybody else run into this? I've had a problem with, we won't mention names here, a builder where I've actually had a couple clients at different times go in, and the agent, the builders actually told them if they ditch their realtor, they'll get it for less money.
Okay, they need to be reported to the, I would report them well, I heard something similar with the builder, and we know without doubt that had the main guys at that builder known that, they would not have been happy. But I think more than ever, we have to educate our clients who are considering possibility of building. And even if they're not, just say, please keep my business cards. And if you suddenly decide you want to go to a builder, call me, and I can ring ahead of time and let them know you're coming. I think there's 1 or 2 builders I've heard that if your client shows up without you on for the first time, they will not pay you a commission, which is just astoundingly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But the builders, I'm afraid some of them are playing dirty, and they know that you know that there's so little inventory that they can call the shots. And it is very disappointing. So I just think the only way is that we can educate our clients that the builders don't have their interest. They're not interested in looking after them. And so it's a detriment to them, our clients, if they go without us. Mm-hmm. And I would kind of go that way, because, you know, if your client goes in and then they're not going to pay you, then you're not going to represent them. I mean, you're not going to work for nothing. And so they're on their own. And so they don't have any representation. So, and I don't think, I would be surprised if any buyer is going to be, oh, I'm okay with if you don't earn any money, but do some work for nothing. I mean, yeah. I just think more than ever, we've got to have those hard conversations, even if it means us explaining things about the market and about what's going on that we normally wouldn't.
Mark, did you have a comment?
Conversations with my buyers, right, in my buyer agents, in my buyer presentation, right up front. At the end of the presentation, once they've agreed to work with me, I go over this. This is what you do if you end up at an open house, or if you come across a for sale by owner or a new build. This is what you do. This is how you handle it. Here's a stack of cards, and just try to give them direction. You know, they don't always do what we tell them to, but at least, you know, when I give them some instructions and give them reasons why, you don't want to just go wandering in and start talking to a builder's agent without me there to represent you. At least it makes sense to them, and they'll be less likely to just wander into some situation.
Yeah, and especially on a new build that can take several months to complete, they do need representation, because lots of things can go wrong. Lots of things.
You really earn your money on a new build, I tell you. You really earn it.
Oh yeah, you're really in the game, and yeah. You do all the work first before you get paid at the end. That's how our game is. But yeah, it's education that will help on this. But in saying that, it won't fix all the issues. You know, we're still going to run into some of these challenges. Okay, let's move on. Let's get on to this number 5, which is agent relationships. And I'll try to speed up a little bit. I just noticed the time's rolling away here. So on this one, basically, we've got a couple of things. I just wanted to mention that watch these forms. On all these forms, sometimes you've got a split paragraph like you have here, which, you know, you've got those buyer initials and the date that splits in between the 2 pages. Just make sure when you're signing these documents, you get all of those pages signed. It's real easy. And you've probably all done as I've done in the past. And thought, oh, I'm not got their signature. Now I've got to go back and get those signatures. That could be a little bit frustrating. So just make sure you don't miss those. And oh, I should have gone through that a bit quicker. Actually, let's just go back on that. I wanted to highlight here that first section is basically talking about appointment of other buyers. So duty of buyer's agent. By signing this broker agreement, buyer designates the buyer's agent and principal branch broker of the company as agents for the buyer to locate the property in the referenced areas we talked about. Buyer authorizes the buyer's agent or the broker to appoint another agent in the company to also represent the buyer in the event that the buyer's agent or the broker will be unavailable to service the buyer. So we're making sure that they're understanding that, and obviously whoever it is that's representing us will also have the same fiduciary duties and loyalty and obedience, confidentiality, etc. that we have. And then we talk about the duties of the limited agent. The buyer understands that the buyer's agent and the broker may now or in the future be agents for a seller who may have a property that the buyer may wish to acquire. And the buyer's agent and the broker will be acting as limited agents. So we explain what that limited agent is. And it's very, very clear in this, this section. It helps the client understand that you can't serve 2 masters. You've either got to tell them everything about everything, or you tell them nothing about nothing. So it becomes very difficult if we are in that platform. So generally speaking, lots of brokerages will encourage us to only represent one or the other. But we do have this little section in here that helps them understand that duties of agent. Any questions quickly on that before I move on to the next screen? Okay, let's move along here. The 5.1 and the 5.2, we've just gone through here. And so I should load in another screen here. Let's go minus the machine. Let's see if we can get this going. Let's try. Here we go. Open it in. There we go. Just covered that. Just covered that. There we go. Just covered that. And yeah, we've covered that. So basically here, what we've got here, we're telling the agent they're going to have some, so we're telling the client they're going to have some agent support, so backup. If we're not available, or we get sick, or we end up in hospital, or on vacation, or whatever it may be, they're going to have some support from the brokerage. And then we also explain to them what the agent fiduciary duties are, and we highlight those in this form. And then we explain what the limited agent duties are in this section. Okay, that's what this section tends to deal with, those 3 main areas. All right. So now let's move to number 6, which is professional advice. And basically on this, we're telling the client, and I love this line because it says it on lots of the documents, the company and the buyer's agent, which is us, we're the buyer's agent, are trained in marketing of real estate. And then it goes on to tell us what we're not trained in. So, you know, we're not trained in figuring out if the property is in good measure, the condition of it. We're not talking about, we're not good in tax or legal matters. We don't know about plumbing or sewer problems or moisture problems or electrical fixings. We don't know about tests or surveys or inspections, or we don't know about any of that. All we know about is marketing real estate. I think this is quite an interesting and amusing section, but it makes it absolutely clear that our client has to get this help from elsewhere. We can't give it them, okay? We can't give it. It says down there, any recommendations for third-party services may be made by the company or the buyer's agent do not guarantee the buyer's satisfaction in use of those third-party services. So we're basically telling the buyer here, look, you're responsible for this. We can give you some names of people we know that you may interview and decide if you like. You know, we know some inspectors. You know, we might know some contractors that deal in, you know, buildings and structure or whatever. But it's up to them to figure those out and to source them. Does that make sense? So in this section here, we're highlighting, and if you notice right in the middle of that section, we're strongly recommending that the buyer engages in professional services to help them figure out the property or anything to do with this transaction. So professional advice is limited from the agent and the company. Our job basically is to market the property or to find the property or help them find the property. Buyer strongly recommends them to seek professional advice for certain areas of this real estate transaction. So that's what we're really talking about in this area on professional advice. Any questions or comments on that number 6 paragraph? Good. Let's toodle on to this one. We want to be like the sheep on the right who's just thinking about this. The one on the left's really going for it. So dispute resolution. The parties agree that any dispute related to this exclusive buyer-broker agreement arising prior to or after the acquisition of the property shall first be submitted to mediation through a mediation provider mutually agreed upon by the buyer and the company. Each party agrees to bear its own costs of mediation. Mediation fails, the other remedies available on this exclusive buyer-broker agreement shall apply. So, first of all, we're saying, look, let's talk about this first before we get going, and we're trying to make it clear that if there is any costs involved, then, you know, each party will pay for those costs in mediation. Hopefully we won't get to this, but we need to discuss it before we get going. Mediation first, each party pays own costs. Has anybody here had a transaction where you have had to go to a dispute resolution and activate this section? Has anybody had that happen? No? Okay. Good. All right then. We had it happen once, and we did have to get a lawyer involved. It was actually between us and one of our clients, believe it or not. But we did have to get some help on that and make it work. So get the professionals involved. We talk a bit about the attorney fees and the governing law. It's important to understand this. So we'll quickly run through this section. And this is except providing 7, which we've already looked at. In case of the employment of an attorney in any matter arising out of this exclusive buyer-broker agreement, the prevailing party, think about the prevailing party shall be entitled to receive from the other party all costs and attorney fees, and that can be a lot, whether the matter is resolved through court action or otherwise. If through no fault of the company any litigation arises out of the buyer's employment of the company under the exclusive buyer-broker agreement, whether before or after the acquisition of a property, the buyer agrees to identify the company and the buyer's agent from all costs and attorney fees incurred by the company and or the buyer's agent in pursuing and or defending such action. This exclusive buyer-broker agreement shall be governed and construed by or in accordance with the laws of the state of Utah. So often we say, if something goes wrong here, it's the earnest money or it's equal to the earnest money, but actually to prevailing party, it could be a lot more than just the earnest money. So hopefully we don't have to push this particular button, but if we do, it can be some heavy penalties in fees there. Anybody got any questions or experience, or anybody had to activate this section of the agreement, or can share a story on it? Okay. So on this one, buyer agrees to compensate or reimburse all costs and attorney fees. That can be big money. And we're making it clear that the exclusive buyer-broker agreement is governed by Utah state law. That's section 8. Anybody got any comments on that section. Okay. Well, let's look at what the buyer is authorizing us to do, or authorizing us to do it in this agreement. Buyer authorizations. The buyer authorizes the company and or buyer's agent to A, disclose after closing to each MLS in which the company participates, consistent with the requirements of, obviously, the MLS, the final terms and sales of the property acquired by the buyer under the terms of this agreement. So what they're saying here is, you know, at the end of the day, when it's all done and dusted, we can disclose all the information on the MLS that they require according to their terms and conditions. B, communicate with the buyer for the purpose of soliciting real estate related goods and services during and after the term of this exclusive buyer broker agreement. The buyer further agrees that in any transaction for the acquisition of the property, as referenced in section 1, that's right at the top there, the earnest money deposit may be placed into an interest-bearing trust with interest paid to the Utah Association of Realtors Housing Opportunity Fund to assist in creating affordable housing throughout the state. So sometimes in this day and age, there's a lot of earnest money going in to some of these transactions. We heard of one deal where they put $100,000, can you believe it was $100,000 non-refundable earnest money into a transaction, $100,000. Can you believe that? That would definitely bring in some good interest. And they're agreeing here that interest obviously will go into that opportunity to Utah Association of Realtors. So any questions on that? Or any comments or any thoughts? Okay, so we're basically saying they're going to be happy for us to disclose the property information to the MLS. It's all the details. It's going to be on there. They'll obviously be happy with the communications with the buyer and earnest money into a interest-bearing trust account. So that's what the buyer is authorizing us to do. Okay, any other questions on that? Okay, let's move on to the next section. All right, so we're on attachments here. So what we've got, obviously we've got these first two here. We've got the buyer due diligence checklist form and the wire fraud alert disclosure, both incorporated into this exclusive buyer broker agreement. So they need to understand that, you know, that's part of this agreement. Now, then we're going to have an opportunity to check either of these two sections. It's going to be these are or are not additional items contained in this section. So there may be some more items we're going to add to this, or there may be not. And if they are not, we're going to click not. And if there are, we'll check the R section. And it clearly states there, if an addendum is attached, the terms of that addendum are incorporated into this buyer broker agreement by this reference. So anything we add is going to be part of the EBBA. So this little section 10 just says incorporations of attachments and addendums to the EBBA. Anybody got any questions or comments on that? All right, let's move on to this one. Now, equal housing opportunity, okay? We're going to comply with the federal, state, and local fair housing laws. So when you think about this, often our clients don't understand what this is. So if you see that little logo there, US Department of Housing and Urban Development, you'll notice we are referring to these 7 federal fair housing laws: race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin. Okay. Has anybody had any challenges with any of these areas? Or has anybody got any stories that they've heard other people have challenges? Okay.
I know recently I've had a lot of buyers, and then on my listings, a lot of letters coming from buyers to the listing agents or to the sellers. And I always refer back to this as, you know, I'm uncomfortable presenting these or, you know, showing them to my sellers because of the fair housing implications one way or another with the material of the letters or the pictures and stuff like that. And I think you just have to be real careful with this section.
I think
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think we're actually, as agents, being, as Brian said, encouraged to tell our clients, our buyers, not to do that. And if we represent the seller, say, I have these letters. If you want to read them, you can. I can't stop you, but I don't recommend you doing it for those reasons. I saw something the other day in the listing. It said, rather than, I actually said, we'll discourage, I think they use the word love letters, but we're happy to see your bank account, you know, or the proof of your funds. And yeah, I think that's something that, as Brian said, for those reasons, we need to discourage either our buyers or our sellers, either not to write one or not to read them.
Yeah, and it's difficult because sometimes you may have a client who's, you know, been a neighbour for a long time, and they get half a dozen of these so-called love letters come in, and then they go and discuss it with their neighbours, and they say, hey, you know, we got this family thing to buy, what do you think? You know, and it's not right. It can give a distorted view of what the contract should all be about. So, you know, that's, oh yeah, we don't want him there. He's, you know, he's disabled. He'll cause us a problem. Oh, they look like they've got 3 dogs in the picture. No, we don't want them barking all day. You know what I mean? So we have to be really careful when we start to share, I guess, specific personal details about families. As Jan said, ultimately, you know, what is the bones of the contract? Do they have the money to buy it? Are the dates good? Is it good earnest money? Can we get this thing going? So just think about this. We are saying here that we'll comply with federal, state and local fair housing laws, and we are covering those 7 areas. The Utah state legislature, if you go to https://le.utah.gov, you can read that. It's quite a detailed document. It's very long, actually, but it will talk about all different laws. You know, it will talk about prohibited conduct and aiding and abetting. It talks about lots of things in there. And if you've got nothing to do one day, it's worth having a look at it, because at least it gives you another piece of the puzzle that you know about. But these 2 pieces on this section 11 are really what we're explaining to our client. Now, you know, when you're working with this EBBA, you're not going to go into super detail the same with everybody. You're going to know your client, and you're going to share with them what they need. And some areas or some parts of the contract you'll spend more time on than others, and others, you know, you'll feel impressed not to go into great detail. But the key thing is that we know what it means, and that we can answer questions, and we can let them understand what they're signing, if that makes sense. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I thought I'd just mention it now. It's just come to mind. When you're meeting with your buyer, or any client, whether it's a buyer or a seller, actually, when you're meeting with them, try and mirror exactly how they're going to be. You don't want to underdress or overdress. You know, if you're meeting with a lawyer, you're probably going to be dressed, you know, you're probably going to be in your suit, you're going to be looking sharp. If you're meeting with a plumber or something, and he's on the job, you're probably just going to be a bit more relaxed. So when you're meeting with folk, try and meet at their standard of dress, so that you're comfortable. And then when you're going through these contracts, it makes more sense that you are proficient in knowing what you're talking about. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions or comments on this slide? Okay, I'll just put a note on that. That's what we've already covered. That's fine. Let's see what we got here. Okay, so this is really good in this modern day. We're all excited that we can have the opportunity to communicate quickly through the wire. basically the client or buyer is accepting that we'll do that. So electronic communication, including email and fax. I think very few people use fax these days. They'll probably take that out one day. I think it's years since I've used a fax. Of a signed copy of this buyer agreement and any addenda. And the retransmission of any signed electronic transmission shall be the same as delivery of an original. That's great. And most of us using, .loop or DocuSign or some other way of getting these forms signed. So basically here we're qualifying that the buyer will accept electronic documents, including any counterparts. Does anyone have any problems with this? Or is this quite easy this day and age? Much easier, I think, than years ago when we didn't have electronic communication. Everything would be hard copy. Okay, so up comes our second keyword. We're about caught up on time now. So this will be buyer. B-U-Y-E-R, buyer. That'll be the second keyword. I can't give you the first one, but I can take it down with a B. And this one also begins with a B. So it'll be buyer, B-U-Y-E-R is a second keyword for this class. Probably just slip it in that form if you've got it. So you get the third one, you can just send them off and bank your hours. Due on sale. So here we go. This is quite an interesting section 13. Certain types of transactions may trigger what is commonly referred to as a due on sale clause. Let's have a think about that. A due on sale clause typically states that the seller's lender or mortgage may call the loan due and payable in full if the seller participates in certain types of transactions. These types of transactions may include, but are not limited to, transactions where A, sale of the property does not result in the underlying debt being paid in full, or B, properties enter into a seller financed transaction. That's usually the one that pops up on this one. Or C, a lease option agreement is entered, or D, any other unauthorized transfer of title to property has occurred without the lender's consent. The buyer understands that if any underlying encumbrances or mortgages on the property contain a due on sale clause, and the due on sale clause is triggered, the lender may call the entire unpaid balance of the loan immediately due. Has anybody had this happen? I haven't. But that's what they're saying, basically. And this could probably happen more often with the seller finances. Sometimes their situations change and they want to call everything in. But it's not an often thing. So make sure the buyer understands that the lender could call in an entire unpaid loan immediately. Obviously, if that happened, the lender could sell the property, I presume, to easily pay that. But just make sure they understand that due on sale clause. No comments or thoughts on that, or no stories? Okay. Let's go to entire agreement. This is a section 14. It says this exclusive buyer broker agreement, including the buyer due diligence checklist form and, of course, the wire fraud alert disclosure. Any other additional addendums contain the entire agreement between the parties relating to the subject matter of this exclusive buyer broker agreement. So, exclusive buyer broker agreement should not be modified or amended except in writing by the parties here too. So everybody has to sign everything. We're going to add things to the buyer broker agreement. It's going to be all signed by everybody and it's all inclusive. So, includes the other documents and not modified unless it is in writing, signed by both parties. Are we all good with that one? Okay. So we refer to this at the very beginning of the document, the effective date. So let's look at this. This exclusive buyer broker agreement is entered into and is effective as of the date. So A, the buyer and the authorized buyer's agent or broker have signed this exclusive buyer broker agreement, and B, the authorized buyer's agent or broker has received a mutually signed copy of this exclusive buyer broker agreement. So it's got to be both of those. It's got to be A and B, okay, in order to have the date effective. And then we're going to have these signatures down here. Make sure that you've got the all of the signatures that are in on this purchase. So we did a transaction earlier this year, and it was parents that were buying with a daughter a property. So, you know, we have, you know, mum and dad and the daughter all on this signed agreement. You need to have them all on there. You can't just have one. If they're all buying the property, they need to be all on there. And of course, at the bottom there, accepted by the company can be your signature or the broker. And make sure you got your dates in there. Any questions on that form? Okay. Make sure you get those date signatures in place and make sure they're the same throughout all your documentation. So at the very bottom of this form, you'll see this C in this circle. It's a copyright. Clearly says this form is copyrighted by the Utah Association of Realtors for use solely by its members. You are a member. We're members of that organization. That's why we can use it. Any other unauthorized use or modification, copying or distribution without written consent is prohibited. You don't need to go through this with your client, but you can share it with them if you like, but it's good for us to know. No representation is made as to the legal validity or adequacy of any provision of this form in any specific transaction. If you desire specific legal or tax advice, consult an appropriate professional. Often we don't necessarily share this with the client, but it's good for them to know that this is a copyrighted form. It's copyrighted and it should not be altered. And you'll notice there it was revised in 2019 on November the 1st. Okay. Any questions about the copyright? At the very bottom of that sheet, you'll see those initials. Make sure you sign those, okay? And just make sure that your client understands and cannot modify or change this document. Okay, so before we go on to Buy's presentation showing homes, shall we just ask any questions on the buyer broker agreement? Anybody got any comments or thoughts or questions or stories or anything they'd like to share before we go on to this second part? All right, who wants to be a showing agent these days? It's tough, isn't it? I got to this property yesterday. I not met this couple basically, and you know, we had a referral from another agent from the Valley share it with us. And so I was out on the road and I went to see them. And we got to the property. And we couldn't get it in the property, of course, because the lockbox is open. Somebody's already in there who were probably late going in there because someone was in there before them. And so it goes on. So there was a whole line. It only come on the market yesterday, this particular house. There was already a line of people lining up to go and see the home. So, and as the realtor came out, I could see she wasn't very happy because she could obviously see the other people lined up to go in. We were next to go in. And I just said, well, how things are? I don't like being the buyer's agent in this market, she says. And I could see that she was feeling a little frustrated. She didn't say this, I just got the impression that this is like another chapter she's running that she's run many times with this particular client, where they've probably already put in several offers and got rejected. And now here is another home, and she can already see that there are a number of interested buyers. And she's thinking, we'll put an offer in this one and we probably won't get it accepted again. So just interesting to feel her vibes were pretty low. I could feel that she'd been spent by that time of the day. Anyway, let's talk about what we can do on showing homes. So here's our little family. We're going to get them into a home. Let's see if we can figure this out. So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about making an appointment with the listing agent. Let's talk this through. If you're viewing multiple homes, be sure to allow enough time between each appointment. Now, in this market, this becomes an even bigger challenge because obviously there's not that many homes compared to how many buyers we have. So let's pause there for a moment and let's ask some questions, or let's have you to share some thoughts on this slide. I'll pause there. Tell me what's on your mind. How do you deal with your client when you've got busy showings and maybe your client wants to see half a dozen homes and you know all of these homes are going to be jam-packed because of the market we're in? How are we going to cope with that? Let's have some thoughts.
Well, mainly I just try and schedule enough time between showings, and then if we're running late, reach out to the listing agent and, or even make it a point beforehand that, if our schedule changes, do you want me to reach out to you and reconfirm?
Yeah, that's a great point, Brian. Communication is definitely the key. And if you are running behind, which could be the case in this type of market, let's make sure the listing agent knows where we are and what we're trying to do. How do you, let me ask you another question, those on this class. How do you deal with the situation the agent comes out? Obviously, the super box is open because they've got the key. What do you do if they say, oh, I'll just leave it open? Or do they put the key back in the box? Or do you just walk into the property? How do we work that? Who's got some thoughts on that? How do we work with that sort of platform when it's such a busy platform? Yes, Mark.
I was going to say, I never leave a property without making sure I put it back in the box and lock it up. And all other agents should as well, because you're just opening yourself up to liability if you do that. But when another agent that's actually walking out, I'll usually tell them, just go ahead and lock it up so that I can unlock it. So there's a record. So there's an accurate record.
Okay, let's keep you on line here, Mark. Here's another question. Let's say, for instance, you really push for time and you think, oh, maybe I'll go in. Maybe I can go and do the downstairs while they're upstairs, or vice versa, to catch up on my time. Have you ever done that? And then what do? Do you still?
Well, you get yourself into situations like that because you can't always plan perfectly. I usually try to step back as much as possible. But if it's a sort of a pressing situation, I'll usually just try to walk in and talk to the listing agent, or sorry, the other showing agent, and just say, mind. And actually just exercise some sort of professional courtesy and ask them if they mind.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Did someone else have a comment on that as well? I thought I saw someone else flag up. I can only see a few people. Okay. Yeah, so it is good to work with the other showing agent if you are pressed for time, and maybe you can work in two parts of the property. And then it is always good if you can to get your key accessed in that super, so that listing agent can know you've been.
I have a
Kimberly, go ahead. Thank you. Just unmute, Kimberly. We couldn't hear you. Start again. Unmute. Just click the unmute button. There you go.
There you go. I was just gonna say, I know it's hard because we're running late a lot of the times in today's market, but one thing that just happened on one of my listings is I had this same thing where agents were lined up and they did not lock the lockbox. They just kept handing the key to each other. And this happened like 5 or 6 times. And the reason I'm even more of a stickler now that I want it to be locked, and I try and lock it up every time myself too when I'm showing, is that one of the agents accidentally walked away with the key. It was in his pocket. And so
you didn't know which one it was, did you?
I didn't know which agent it was. I spent hours calling because I looked at the record of the Supra and all the people who had showed it that I had a record of, they had locked it up. They didn't like, I had no way of knowing who had the key, and it took hours to solve, and he didn't know he had it. It was a complete accident. So I just think if you have, there's another reason yet again to have that record of who's been in the property and who hasn't.
You know, I kind of had a similar situation. So it was probably about 2 years ago, pulled up to a house in South Jordan, and it looked like an open house scenario with people milling about. There was probably 5 to 7 different parties, and the agent who had the key had lost it in the yard. And so while they're looking for the key in the yard, people are just willy-nilly going through the house. And it was a very uncontrolled, and it was just a real weird situation.
Yeah, very, very good points there. I think if I'm thinking now, if I was the listing agent, I might actually put a little note by the super and say, hey, please put the key back in before you go, at least open it up. Maybe just to help agents, because some agents are not thinking straight and they're busy. And yeah, things get in a rush. Sometimes things can get missed. I do remember having someone call me up. It was late at night, and I was living in Harriman, which is in, you know, the Salt Lake Valley. And we had a house in, I think it was Tooele. Anyway, someone rings up. They'd just shown the house, and it was like 9:30. It was dark. 9:30, quarter to 10. It was late in the evening. They said, I've lost the key in the bushes. I cannot find it. And it was the only key we had. It's the only key that the seller had. And we got showings the next morning. And I was thinking, I'm going to have to drive all the way out to Tooele to find this key. Thankfully, they did find it after, you know, a good 30 minutes or plus looking, but it was a little bit nail biting at the time. So I always put like a bit of coloured ribbon or string or something on the key, so if they do drop it in the bushes, you can find it rather than just a key on it. So I can put a nice fob on it or something, because if you get the keys lost, it's a problem. Okay, so yeah, let's make sure we got enough time between each appointment, and if we are working on those super boxes, let's be sure to make sure we get recorded if that's at all possible. So it's good to know a little bit about the house, learn the selling points of both the home and the neighborhood. Often this can be helpful if we know that beforehand and can make sure that our client is familiar with the neighborhood and they're happy with it. Because there's no looking at a house if they're not going to be happy with the neighborhood or what's going on there. What are some of the selling points that we might find in a neighborhood that might be worth sharing with our client before we go and see it?
Well, I think local, you know, amenities. Is there a park, schools? You know, are you close to shopping, close to transportation? I think those are things that may spark interest. You know, how well you know your clients. Do they like to golf? If they like to golf, then where's the nearest golf course?
Very good. Yeah, very good. And, you know, some clients don't want any of that. They just want to be out. I mean, the client I showed yesterday the house, they said it was very, very quiet area. It was out in the, you know, the wilderness really. So yeah, we don't want to be near anything. We want to be out in the sticks sort of thing. That's what they wanted. So it was a perfect location for them. They didn't want to be in the city in the buzz and, you know, busyness. So yeah, know the area of the neighborhood, make sure you know it, which is important. And you can make sure that your client's going to be good. Because often when they're just looking at houses on the MLS, they may not be looking at the neighborhood. They may just be looking at the home and what the home has. So just make sure that you're aware and they're aware of the neighborhood. And as Laura said, whatever amenities are there, you know, schools and clubs and whatnot. So ideal to print this full agent and client report. Obviously you will keep the agent one and you know, give them the client report, but there's a lot of stuff on here. You know, there's a lot of things that are really good for them to see quickly as they view the property. Even though they've seen it beforehand, if you're showing multiple homes, if you've got one of these, you can give them during the showing time. They've got something to make notes on and they've got something to refer to as they're walking the home. So often these will obviously have the price on there, will see days on market. That's if we get to days on market. Some of these houses are just hours on the market, as we know. Square footage, of course, is real important, and number of rooms and baths and beds. Size of the garage is usually pretty important, and whatever the acreage is. Maybe they need pets, or maybe they don't need pets. That's also important, and of course, amenities and remarks. You'll also find there may be something in their agent remarks that they don't have on the sheet that you might be able to highlight. So it's important that we have these when we're sharing, if we can have them, because at least we can talk a little bit more about the property and hopefully answer any questions they may have about the property as we're going through the property. Any thoughts or comments how we can use this, well, how else we can use this, this MLS report? Okay, let's move on then, and let's look at some parts of this that might be helpful. So we've already talked a little bit about being courteous to our seller. I think Brian mentioned, if he was running late, be courteous to talk to the seller and say, hey, we're going to be out quite a bit because we've been delayed, and make sure they're aware of that. Good idea to place these reports in the order in which you're going to the property, so you can quickly access it and give the wrong one. Be on time. That's sometimes can be quite difficult if you've been delayed on a previous visit. Sometimes it's your client that takes too much time in a building. You've got to jilly them along a little, so just think about that. Let's see what we've got there. And we just covered that piece there. All right. And here's a thought. I just put a note on it. It's sometimes good to view the property, even if your buyer decides not to enter. I've had a buyer previously who've got to the house and then they've said, oh, this is not going to work. There's a lamppost in front of or there's the school bus there, or there's a stop sign, or there's a water hydrant, or I can see there's not enough room for my RV. No, I'm not going in there, it's gone. So I've said to them, I said, look, why don't we just go and look at the home anyway, because these good folk have prepared the home for us and they've left the home. And they said, no, I'm not interested. I personally will open up the super box. I'll walk the home. So at least I can give the agent, the selling agent, a report on what the home looks like. Because I know they're going to contact me and say, hey, Steve, how did that go? I'll say, hey, it wasn't a good fit for my buyers, but the home shows really nice. I think your value or your listing price is about where it needs to be, or whatever it may be. I think that's courteous to the seller. And I personally think when I've been representing the seller and I've had agents that have just not got in to the home, I felt a bit disappointed, and certainly my clients has felt frustrated that they've reorganized their afternoon to let the house be shown. They didn't even walk in the home. So that's my thought on that. Let's pause for a moment and see if anybody else has got any thoughts on that. If you've got a client who says, no, I don't want to see the home. Anybody got any thoughts on that, how you would deal with it? Let's see if I can squeeze a comment out of someone. Kimberly,
I was just going to say, I think the example you gave us was perfect. That's why we don't have anything else to add.
Thank you, Kimberly. Wonderful. I'm always here to learn. But anyway, there we have it. Good. Let's move on to where we would meet. At the property, of course, probably better to meet, not necessarily in this market, but generally when it's a gentle market, I would get there sort of, 10 minutes beforehand, maybe 15 minutes beforehand, make sure the lights are on, all the doors are open, and then go outside and meet them outside. That's what I would generally do. But meeting them outside the property is nice. Rather than taking them in your car, I would not take people in the car because of liability. I would meet them at the property. That's what I would do. Allow the buyers to talk with one another alone. If they're traveling in their car, they can do that. If they're traveling with you, obviously they may not do that. I just covered that section. And going over Laura's point earlier, if you don't know the neighbourhood, it's good to drive to the neighbourhood beforehand to see where the schools and shops and etc. are. Any comments on that slide? Or as Kimberly says, if you all agree, no comments. Very good. Let's move on to be prepared. Obviously, preview the property and figure out what the special features are. We've done a lot of listings with bigger houses, and we've always done like a 3D view of the home so that people can see the home before they actually get there, and it's easy then to show those features. Talked about that with the buy at the curbside, give them the specification sheet, and of course remind the buyer how much time they've got at the property. Sometimes you've got buyers that forget that they've only got a limited amount of time before you have to move on. Another good thing to do is to leave your business card at the property. That can be certainly helpful to the seller agent to know who's been in the home. Yes, Laura?
Hey, quick question about what company do you use for your 3D? I know there's several of them out there. I'm just curious what you use and how much they charge.
So we've not used one up here in Cache. The one we used in Salt Lake County. Leslie, can you remember their name? I'm just trying to think of their name now.
3D Property Tours, I think. And
that's what it was. Yeah, 3D Property
by the square footage. We have always done 3D imaging.
And drone. We've done drone as well.
And the drone footage. And then from the 3D imaging, they do take stills.
So the good thing about the drone footage is people can see the property, and particularly with larger homes, they can see just where the property's situated, they can see what's around it, can see the amenities, that they can really see the neighborhood really well. So, and we would say to people, you know, that were, well, agents that were calling to view these properties, we say, have you been able to see the 3D tour? And if they hadn't, we'd always encourage them to look at that before they took the clients to the property, because they may decide when they looked at the 3D tour and the drone that, okay, this is probably not going to be a good fit for us. Or they may say, hey, this is a really good fit. And then, of course, when they walk the property, they are even more excited because, you know, they're seeing it in 3D walk rather than 3D pick. So that's what we've done, Laura. We found it to be very successful. Price-wise, at the top of my head, I'm thinking probably what, $400 or something. Leslie Ann, would we pay about $400?
Yeah, I think that they do a good deal, and I don't think we ever paid. I think on a bigger property we may have spent $500, but I think with smaller properties, I think it can be as low as $250.
Yeah, and they're very quick and good. We found that by having this measure of visual available before they go to the property, we would find that more or less all of our showings would be good showings. We wouldn't necessarily have people that were not interested in the property come to the property. We'd end up with good showings. And we would pay for this service. We'd say to our clients, hey, we'll pay for the photography. Doesn't cost you anything. We'd ask them to pay for a staging expert, and then we'd refund them that money at settlement. So that won't cost them anything either. But this way we get the property showing us its very best. But certainly if you've got that, it's a really good way of getting good interested buyers into the property. Hope that answers your question, Laura.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, let's move on. Keep your business cards rolling, folks, and keep those. So touring the home, 4 to 6 homes is probably a good package to run with. I remember once in my early days doing 13 homes in a day. I was spent to bits by the end of it. So half a dozen homes is a good working run. Okay, so I figured that out the hard way. Make sure that you explain the report, the MLS report, to your clients so they understand it, and then they can read it quickly. And sometimes you can highlight with a highlight pen the important things that you think they're going to be interested in. Obviously, they're interested in the price and square foot, and if they're interested in pets or interested in, you know, what's included, what's excluded, or the acreage, you can highlight those items that you've already had a chat with them, and it can help them to be familiar with that property. You can ask them to put the things they like and dislike. They can write some notes, the things on the back, what they like, what they don't like, which can be very helpful when you're reviewing the properties. Make a note of any personal property the buyer would like to include in a potential offer. So, yeah. I think it's important, particularly sometimes when we can be feeling a little bit overworked or frustrated, is still be upbeat. Make sure this home is a fun tour. Ask them what they like, ask them what they can see in the home that might be good for them, and you know, make it a lively meeting, a lively platform. Let's talk about this one for a minute, because this is important. Everybody's got different ideas on homes. Some people like some colours and some people don't. Some people like bigger spaces or smaller spaces or different styles. Be careful in our conversation. I put here that we're neutral, because what you like and what you may not like may not be the same as what they like or dislike. So let's have a chat about that for the moment. Anybody got any stories where they've found out in the conversation that what they may feel to be not a very good looking home their client loves, or vice versa? How do we cope with it? How do we have to be careful when we are in conversation with our clients? How do we work with this? Any thoughts? No thoughts on that one, huh? Well, here's some things to think about. I mean, you may see a room that has some coloured walls that you're not particularly keen on personally, but you wouldn't say, "Oh, that's an awful purple they've put on that wall," because they may like the purple wall. You also got to be careful, because in this modern day, a lot of homes do have either cameras or some type of recording apparatus in the home, which could be recording what you're saying and what your clients are saying in the home. So sometimes it might be good to warn your client to be careful, not to be too negative in there, because it could be being recorded. Unfortunately, we live in that age, and we ourselves need to be neutral, and we need to be careful that we can navigate that showing gently for them to evaluate it in a way which will be professional and desirable, but not to create any bad vibes towards the seller. Has anybody had any experiences where they've come across this challenge with recording devices in a home during a showing? Here's another question for you then, just slightly on topic here. If you've got a client who says, "Hey, can I use the restroom?" How would you respond to that if you were during a showing? I'm going to hold out, see if someone can respond to that one for me, because that's a really good question. Brian, you're going to take it. Great, you're the man.
I'd probably say if we're looking at multiple homes, like, you know, say we'll make a pit stop at the Maverick or something in lieu of using the residence's loos. Yeah,
tell me a bit more about that, Brian. When your client says, "Well, why can't we just use the restroom there?" How would you respond on that? What are some of the downsides that could happen?
Well, just it's a courtesy to the homeowners. You know, usually you ask permission if you're visiting someone's house, like, "Hey, can I use your restroom?" If they aren't present and able to give consent, you know, you just gotta tread carefully, because you never know.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else got any thoughts on that?
I actually remember some years ago hearing a story of when they flushed the toilet, something stuck and it flooded. So, I mean, that's not likely to happen, but it did happen, and it flooded the house. And so consequently, that did not go down very well.
Right.
Or actually, I was showing a house where the water was turned off. And so they, just as a side thought that I had, you know, they tried to turn on the faucet and, you know, the water didn't work. But that's something I remembered that, yeah, if somebody used the restroom, that could be very embarrassing.
Right, very good. And, you know, just if we were the seller's agent, it might be helpful for you to have like a little note, little sign somewhere that might encourage people not to use the restroom. That may be helpful to people that are looking at the home. Often it can be the children that can just go into a restroom without anybody knowing, and sometimes they can not be the cleanest folk, not being careful. So, any other thoughts on that? Okay. All right, so let's move on here and see what we got. So obviously we're showing the home, it may not be so much in this market because obviously there are lots of showings happening, but there may be the time we walk into a home and it hasn't been prepared properly. Maybe the agent has only just joined the game, or maybe the sellers have not got the home ready. So ideally, if you can get to a home beforehand and make sure that there's plenty of light in there. I know you're kind of doing the seller's agent's job, but you've got a client you're trying to sell a home to. So get in there early, make sure you've got the rooms as big as light as possible by simply putting the lights on, and opening up those blinds or drapes will be a good thing. Consider ceiling fans as well. Obviously, if it's very warm, you have the ceiling fan on. In the winter, you wouldn't need a ceiling fan on, but just be aware of ceiling fans. Sometimes ceiling fans can be generating a lot of cool, which may not be as attractive if it's not a hot day. Sometimes they can be noisy. So just think about the ceiling fans, consider what you're going to do with those if you're showing a home. Any thoughts on that slide? All right, let's go on to this next one here. So I don't know how many of you have been on the disc presentation, but it's worth thinking about this when you're showing a home. And the disc, of course, is the DISC, which is dominance, interacting, steadiness, and conscientious. So if you can understand people's personalities, it can be more helpful when you're working with a client showing them a home. So let's just have a little chat about this for a moment and see whether or not we can come up with some thoughts that might be helpful. Has anybody on this class actually been on or studied this topic, the personality skills? Nobody? Okay, well, we do have a class on this. And you can probably find out when the date's coming up on this. We go through it in quite detail. But let me briefly explain it to you, which may be helpful. So people have different personalities, and generally speaking, they can fall into one of these four categories as a major trend of their personality. And that can be mixed with any of the other three. So you could have someone who's more of a dominant character, who maybe is more progressive, a leader, quite keen to make decisions, quick to make decisions, very interested in facts and figures, and usually, quick to come to a conclusion. If you're working with someone that's a D, you'll find that they're going to be pretty crisp, they don't mess around, they walk in the house, yep, or it's going to be no, and you're going to figure out roughly where they are. And you'll need to have information available, because they may say to you, okay, how many days it's been on the market? They may say, are they, has the agent had any offers in yet? What's the history of this? They'll want to know information about the property in some detail to make a quick decision. Those that are enacting, they're more, I guess, emotional type people. They'll look at the aesthetics of the building. They often will want to spend more time in that home to figure out what's going on. You've got to probably be a bit more patient with them, in the sense that they will want to feel the goodness of that home. They want to feel it. They want to get a relationship with the property. And if you see them doing that, you'll notice that they will be placing things in rooms which will obviously give you an indication that they're very interested in the property. Those that are steady are generally quite comfortable with most of the other types of personalities, and they will be careful on making a decision. They may need a bit of extra time, so they may not want to be necessarily pressurized in making a decision. Good thinkers, those who are conscientious, are probably more, a little bit like the accountant approach. They're looking at the figures, trying to see if it's going to work for them, and they also may need a little bit of time to figure out what they're going to do. So just be conscious when you're working with a client as to what their style of personality is. Try and mirror their personality, irrespective of what personality you are. You can't push a C quicker than they're ready to go. So you just got to be patient. Anybody got any thoughts or comments on how they've done showings where they've recognized different personality skills or styles which have enabled them to progress or help that client? Okay. Here's some thoughts.
I had a client once. I had a client, a buyer who was very analytical and had a list of 25 or 30 things he wanted to investigate into every house that we looked into. And so it was, making the showing window 45 minutes versus a half hour, because I knew he was going to take the time and check off his list of everything he wanted.
That's perfect, Brian. It's exactly what I wanted to hear. If you can figure out what that is, it can help you. If he was a D, you probably only need 15 minutes in there. But because he was a C, you needed the 45. You can't rush him. You can't say, we've got to get going, because it's not going to work. So you have to carefully work with the listing agent so you can get enough time to help that buyer be comfortable during that showing. That's perfect. So I've just shared up some very brief overviews that you might find useful when you're working with clients that are different types of personalities. So a D, a dominant type personality, very interested in facts, always interested in the numbers. Most likely they're going to ask you questions, and they're totally okay with you asking them questions. These guys do give clues quite quickly on what they like and what they don't like. So listen for those. And often this type of character will make a decision fairly quickly. So that's good to know. If you're looking at sort of the dominance, you've got to be able to be in play to help them. Any questions on?
Well, I think I'll share something for Sadie, Kimberly, and Carmen. And years ago, back when I was more of a hungry agent, you're willing to, I was kind of more risky back then, but
right.
I had a male client who just really he was very passive about things, and he wanted to go see homes in remote places. And I worked with him quite a bit on the telephone, and he had a very common name, Greg Christensen. And he wanted to meet me, and I normally don't get in cars with men, but I've had some weird situations where it's at night and a husband and wife are supposed to meet me at a property, and it's dark, and the husband shows up because the wife's at home with a bunch of kids and couldn't make it, and he wants to see the property. So there's some weird situations like that. But in this particular situation, he wanted to meet me at the base of I-84 and go up, and he wanted to see homes in Mountain Green. They're all spread out, Corinne, Mountain Green. So he wanted me to ride with him. But I pulled up and I had this really weird feeling. He's supposed to be a dentist, and he didn't look like a dentist. And so this is back in the days of flip phones. And I just had this feeling before I get in his car to, get his license plate and pretend like I'm talking to my husband and give a description. To let them know that, let him know that other people know I'm going with him. So I get in his car, and, his car, I see that, anyway, we drive up the Mountain Green to the first property, and he does not seem interested at all in seeing the property. And so at that time, I felt really, creepy, and I just ended the tour and had to bring me back. Well, months later in the newspaper, I see this sketch that looks just like him. So he a rapist. Wow. Police catch him. But wow. Yeah, the same car, the internal car and everything. And I really feel like if I hadn't taken the time to, get out my flip phone and walk around his car and look at his license plate, he didn't get out of his car, he stayed there. And the whole thing was just really creepy. But so just never get in a car. If they say, it's a long drive, you have to meet people, just never get in anybody else's car, period. Unless you're female.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Great story. And that's why it's important that we try and do a little bit of research with the characters of the people we're working with, because often we don't know them. This is the first time we meet them when we're showing a home. It's great if we're working with a couple, because that's safety in numbers, but if it's one-on-one, be very, very careful. Not only for our own safety, but for being accused of doing something, you know what I mean? Certainly we as men have to be careful that we're not accused of doing something when we've not done anything. And so you've got to put yourself in safety of numbers if you possibly can. But getting to know people's styles and characters and personality traits can be helpful when we're looking at showing a home. And obviously on that instance, Laura, you spent some time looking at the character and it didn't feel good. And thankfully you got out of there because that was important.
Well, and when you do an open house now, of course you don't need to do it now because you get a lot of people coming through open house, but back when the economy's down and you hardly have any showings, you do an open house. I put a camera in the window. I mean, I don't know if you remember, back in Arizona and stuff, Keller Williams. I'm not with Keller Williams anymore. I was there for 11 years, but they had some agents that were taken from open houses and killed, So I always have a camera, on these slower, when the economy's slower, in the window.
And also, on an open house, you can have other people there. They don't have to be agents. You can have just some helpers, you know what I mean? Members of your family or friends that can just be there watching as security help. They don't have to be an agent to do that. So dominant characters, you're looking at that. If you're looking at interacting, these guys or ladies want to talk about it. You'll notice they have like a vibe and excitement about the property. They do need to be enthusiastic about it. They'll often vision the home with friends and maybe want a party, or we have anniversaries or birthdays here or whatever, and usually fairly quick to make a decision when they've got through that moment. But that time, so that can take some time for them to get excited about the place. They may need a bit more time than the D's. And then you've got the S's, which are the steady folk. You'll need to be a good listener, because if you're a D and you've got a C, an S out there as a character, you need to sort of hold back a little bit. Listen. These characters will definitely ask nice, searching questions. Try and mirror with them. Make sure your body language and your voice tone and volume and speed is similar to theirs, because they don't really want to be rushed too much. And you'll need to be in tune with these guys. They will be, they'll need some time, and you'll need to be supportive of that. You probably won't be able to rush these guys too quickly. And similar, even more so with the conscientious folk. These guys definitely want all the facts. They don't want to do anything until they know all the numbers. Most likely they're not going to make a decision on the day, which could be rough in this market. They'll want to think about it, by which time the property's gone, unless they can move a bit quicker, because these guys are definitely slow to make decisions. And often we'll go home and think about it and then say, hey, can you give me some more information on this? So if you can figure out where characters are, you can more easily navigate them through a showing. And so it's good to have that knowledge on the disc skill. And if you haven't done that course, I'm not sure if Leslie hadn't found out when it was coming on, but it'll be within the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll have that course.
16th of June, a Wednesday afternoon that the disc class runs again.
Okay, so that'll be 1 till 3 on 16th of June, and we go into it in great detail. So if you're not done that before, it's worth seeing. All right, obviously when you're walking through the rooms, you're going to ask them, obviously the living room, you ask them what it's looking like and can they fit the furniture in? Is it big enough, small enough, high enough, wide enough? If you're looking at the kitchen, usually the ladies are interested in that. Want to make sure that the kitchen is going to serve them. Do they like the sink in the island unit or on the side? Or, you know, you've got to make sure that they are happy and comfortable that this kitchen is going to work for them. And then, of course, the same with the master bath. And, you know, ask the questions. You know, you want the tub and shower or separate or one or the other, open, etc. So when you're walking through rooms, make sure that they can see if these rooms are going to be working for them, what they like about the room, what they don't like about the room, because that can help you when you're looking at the next possible property. So the next keyword just come up there. So let's pull that up. And this keyword is, bath. So B-A-T-H, quite an easy one. That'll be the third keyword, which is bath, B-A-T-H. If you've got your form there, you can just slip it on there and send it, and we can get that done for you. So bath will be the third keyword.
Okay, I always do this. What was the second one? I've been here the whole time. And
so, yeah, there you go. So just talk to Leslie Ann, she'll let you know on that one. We shouldn't really repeat it on this. So you just talk to Leslie Ann. It was another B word, the bath, but this one's bath. Okay.
And I don't know why I missed these because I'm right here. Maybe I'm taking notes or daydreaming. I don't know.
I definitely know you're here. That's for sure, Laura. I'm grateful for your engagement. So another thing to look at is how to rate the home. You can do this in lots of different ways. So I put down here, if you're working on the 1 to 10 basis, and it's ideal to write it on their sheet as you're going through, or write it on your sheet, write it on their sheet. Often 6 or below is probably not going to make the game, okay? 7 is good, 8 is very good, 9 is excellent, and 10 is perfect. And I once had a client, and I think there was like 3 homes that were either 9s or 10s, which was great because he was going to buy one of those 3 homes, and he did. And if you know where your client is placing these homes, you're going to be in good shape. Other people use the king style, or the king rate, where the first home they see, this is the king. So there's no other house on the market. This is the one we're buying because you've got to move. Okay. And then they go to the second home and they say, is that better than the king? And they say, no, first home is still the king. And they get to the 5th home and they say, hey, this is better than the king. So now you've got a new king. Okay. So that style of rating enables you to figure out which house they like. At the end of the day, you're going to have the king. And that's the one you're going to put the offer in. So that's another way of doing it. And there's probably other different ways as well. Generally, people work on the 1 to 10 or the king is best option. Does anybody else have any other ways in which they rate homes, or are these usually the 2 that we are familiar with? All right, we on the last stretch on this. I think we're just about out of time, which is great. So today we've covered the exclusive buyer broker agreement, running that in some detail, starting off with that sheet there. And then we tucked into the buyer's presentation. We talked about showing homes and looked at a few different principles of showing homes. On the BBA, we just a few notes here. Just make sure that your buyer understands the EBBA and make sure that your buyer is not working with another realtor. And of course, make sure that all details and signatures are present and correct on that form. And then as you work with your presentation, make sure you know the property and you're all prepared before you get there, be on time. Identify any benefits and features of the home, and maybe benefits of what is there, features of what it means to them. And then maybe use the DISC personality skills to help you understand characters. Always be courteous and patient, both with your client and also the seller and seller's agent. And maybe rate the property in some form now, which will enable you to eliminate properties that will not work for you or for them. Any questions or comments on that? You've been a great group. Appreciate those of you who have been able to share your comments and your thoughts and your stories, which we're grateful for. I'll let Leslie Ann wrap up this lesson unless everybody's got any final questions before we finish up.